This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. This show is also brought to you by our patrons. If you want to support the show in a different way, with just $1 a month, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. You can get a sticker. You can get access to an exclusive show that we do every month that's wild and chaotic and fun and something you can only get by becoming a member of the Patreon. There'll be so many more perks very, very soon. But for now, do you want a sticker? Do you want a sticker that has a Now This Is Lit logo? Because it's fantastic and I love them. But I also want to give them away because there's just a stack of stickers on my desk. So if you want one, $1 a month. Patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. It is 2024, which means 10 years ago was 2014, believe it or not. And in 2014, something very important in Star Wars publishing happened, and that was the final book in what we now call Legends was published. Which also means books that we now call canon were published as canon for the first time. 2014 was the start of what we refer to as canon now. It was all just the expanded universe before. Now there's Legends and canon. I have a whole episode about that if you don't know the difference. It's not as complicated as you might think. There's a strict cutoff. What a lot of people don't realize, and what I didn't realize for a while, because I'd never looked into it, was when the Disney acquisition happened, Legends didn't immediately become Legends like on that date. So in 2014, there wasn't like all of a sudden it's just canon now. There were some Legends books still published at the beginning of 2014. And then later in the year, canon became canon. And I'm going to go through all of that in this episode. This episode is based on a newsletter post that I did earlier this year that I really enjoyed doing. And I realized with the 10-year anniversary of New Dawn that I never actually did an episode about it, about 10 years, about Star Wars books that are 10 years old. And not many of you read my newsletter. So I figured you didn't even know that this exploration had happened. So we're going to do it on the show now. Just me in front of a microphone. I know it's your favorite kind of Now This Is Lit episode, but this is where we're at. Season 3 is off to a great start. It really is. So let's talk about this. There were 9 Star Wars books published in 2014. Some, as I said before, some Legends and some canon. Of course, they weren't called Legends when they were published, but now that's what we call them. That's how you differentiate when you're talking about Star Wars books between the books that came before everything shifted and after. It's not that one is better than the other. It's not that one matters more than the other or one matters and one doesn't. It just is a way to differentiate. This is not the continuity we're following now. This is. Kenobi by John Jackson Miller is a different continuity, technically, than A New Dawn. It sounds confusing. Again, I'm going to link that episode that explains the difference better because we've already talked extensively about that. But it is interesting to me that there is a divide, even in 2014, 10 years ago, when Legends stopped and canon began. There is a gap. There is a gap in publishing. There weren't books published for a number of months. And then it all started, and I think it's really fun, people don't realize this, is it really all started with Rebels. There were multiple books in the second half of 2014 that were published along with Rebels starting. Rebels started in October of 2014, so really it was like the kickoff of everything. And that's why you have books like A New Dawn, but that's not the only one. That's not the only one that was Rebels focused. I'm going to talk about all of them. So there are 9 books in total that were published 10 years ago, meaning they turned 10 this year. Listen, I know it's like toward the end of the year and I could have done this at the beginning of the year, but that's just not how it happened. That's just not how it happened because this is an independent podcast and it's just me and one other person working on it. So sometimes things don't happen when they should, but the most important thing is that they do happen and they're happening now. So I'm going to start with the 2 Legends books that were published at the start of 2014. We're talking, this first one was in January, and this was Mall Lockdown by Joe Schreiber. And that came out on January 28th of 2014. This one I have not read yet, which I know is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. I really want to read it. It's just the case with a lot of Legends, which is I just have not gotten around to it yet. I talked earlier this year about my reading resolutions and one of them being to finish the New Jedi Order. As I'm recording this, I have not finished it yet, but I'm gonna by the end of the year. And then maybe next year I will explore some more of the Legends books that I have not gotten to yet, but I really want to. The thing with Legends and me, I'll go on this tangent because this is what happens when you don't give me a script and just let me sit in front of a microphone and talk. I eventually would like to read every Legends book that has ever been published. There are a lot of them, hundreds of them. There are people who have done it, and that's impressive. Maybe you read them as they came out, or you're just now catching up on all the ones that you missed, or you're just rereading all of it from the beginning of time until Legends stopped in 2014. I don't know. I can't tell you how to do it or live your life. That's up to you. But for me, I read some Legends back before they were Legends as they were coming out, but not all of them because I loved to read, but I wasn't like engrossed in Star Wars books as I am now. Apparently, according to my online persona, that's all that I care about. It's really not the case, but that's beside the point. I am a supporter of all Legends, whether fan favorites or not. And I'm on a mission to read all of them. I don't know how far we'll get in the next couple of years, but we will see. So Mall Lockdown is the first of our 9 and the first of the 2 Legends books that were published to finish out this continuity, if you will. I call it a continuity. It's not really that, but that's just, for me, the easiest way to explain it to people who don't know the difference between canon and Legends. I call Legends an alternate continuity because it kind of is. Legends could be true in a different universe, in an alternate timeline, so to speak, but that's not really how the Star Wars universe is structured. But it makes sense. When I say that, you know what I mean. That's all that really matters. If you understand what I'm trying to get at, then that's the explanation that works, and that's what I'm going to go with. Someone can yell at me and tell me a better way to say it if that's the case, but so far no one has done that, so I will continue on as I am. The second Legends book that was published in 2014, and the final Legends book that was published in 2014. For a long time, I thought it was Kenobi in 2013. I was wrong about that. I may have actually said something about that in the lead up to the 10-year anniversary of Kenobi last year. I was incorrect. But sometimes, actually all the time, when we're incorrect about things on the internet, the best thing to do is to admit that we were wrong and correct ourselves and move on. So that's what I'm doing. I'm laughing at myself. This is fun. I hope you're having as much fun listening as I am recording this. You may remember from my On Second Thought episode when I reread Heir to the Jedi, I talked about how Heir to the Jedi was originally supposed to be a trilogy, but Heir to the Jedi is a canon book, and the other 2 books that it was supposed to be in a trilogy with ended up being Legends. The second one of those is Honor Among Thieves by S.A. Corey, who is, fun fact, 2 people, not just 1, 2. I have read Honor Among Thieves. This came out on March 4th, 2014. I loved this and Razor's Edge, which are unofficially, I actually don't know, a duology, because Heir to the Jedi got booted into canon, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad book, as we learned in my episode where I reread it after spending years hating it, and then rereading it and realizing I was just in a dark place. And if you want to go back to that episode, highly recommend that. It was quite a journey, and I learned a lot. Now, Honor Among Thieves ended up being the end of Legends, not the end of the Legends timeline. That I don't actually know off the top of my head what the last book in the Legends timeline is. I feel like maybe it's the Millennium Falcon. Again, I may be wrong about that. I can't fact check right now because I'm on a roll, so I'm going to keep going. But let's discuss that in the comments. It's so weird to me that Spotify has comments now. Someone left a comment on an episode, and I was like, this feels wrong. This feels too much like Twitter. It's not. It's fine. Leave all the comments you want. It's good for engagement, and maybe helps more people find the show, which I would really love because I just like making it, and I don't ever want to have to stop. So that's the end of this. Is going to be a really long episode at this point. So that's the end of Legends. Still at 2014 though. We got a lot left. I said there were 9. We got 7 more. So what are those 7? You may not be as familiar with some of these. I was not before I did the research for this newsletter post. I almost said article. It's an article. I wrote it. It has my name on it. It's me on the internet. All right. So I mentioned before that there were a lot of Rebels adjacent books leading up to the release of Rebels. So, Rebels books before Rebels existed, which is an interesting thing, but not unheard of in Star Wars publishing. And the first one of those was not, in fact, A New Dawn. It was Rise of the Rebels by Michael Cogg. Kids book, young reader's book, whatever you want to call it. Have admittedly not read it, but I want to. One really interesting method that I just thought of just now as I was talking and may apply to later endeavors. One interesting way to make sure you eventually get around to reading all the Legends or to reading all the books that you haven't read, Legends or otherwise, is just to look at the books that are turning 10 years old and make sure you've read them all. That's including the young readers books, which don't get as much love, but they should. So I think I should read this one because that seems important. So that's one of them. And then there's another one before we get to A New Dawn. I know you're waiting for that one. There's another one. And that's Ezra's Gamble by Ryder Wyndham. Oh, that came out on August 5th, as did the one that I talked about before. I didn't say the date. Both of these came out on August 5th. That's a theme with Disney Publishing, is they like to put books out on the same day. Star Wars books. They've gotten better at that with the High Republic books being more spread out. But they kind of go together. So it in terms of a marketing strategy, it's not the worst. I kind of dunked on it. I really shouldn't have done that, but so that's August 5th. Those first 2 books came out. And if I'm again, I haven't read them yet, but from my experience, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in this episode, from my experience with Rebels adjacent publishing, if you like Rebels, you're going to like these books, which is the case with a little book you may have heard of that just turned 10 earlier this month, called A New Dawn by John Jackson Miller. That came out on September 2nd, 2014. When I talked to John Jackson Miller, both in the first episode I had him on for, where we kind of ended up going through his whole, everything that he's written in Star Wars. And then again, when I was interviewing him for Insider, which you only got to read part of that, not the whole thing. But we did end up talking about his experience writing A New Dawn, where he had very little to go off of when he was writing it, because he obviously started writing it a long time before not only any of us had seen Rebels, but before Rebels really was ready to be seen. So he didn't have much to go off of. He had some things, but not a lot. And so for him to be able to write this prequel, essentially, write these characters that would become, the Kanan and Hera that we knew, that we would end up knowing from the show, he hadn't because that's what I assumed at first, was he'd watched some of the show or like some early something and then based the book off of that, but that's not how it happened. Because book timelines in terms of like when you are like outlining and writing and submitting versus when the books actually come out, it's a long time. It's much longer than you'd think. So he kind of he didn't wing it. It's not really, you don't wing things like that, but he kind of just made a lot of stuff up. Which that's why like so much of the story is as like focused on original characters essentially, because you can't base it on what you know off of Kanan and Hera, because number one, it takes place before the show, and second of all, you don't really know them, you don't really know who they are, which is, I think, that would be really fun. That would be really fun. Anyway, we have not, I did a 10 years of Kenobi episode last year. I have not yet done a 10 years of A New Dawn, and I promise we are doing something. It just has not happened yet. Summer was. I took a little bit of a break from recording with people. And so I'm a little bit behind, but that's okay. These things happen. And like I said earlier in the episode, all that matters is that it happens eventually. It's going to be a really good episode. It just has not happened yet. I promise it will. We get to talk about now the beginning of one of my favorite Star Wars book series ever. And I need to have this author on to talk about it. And maybe that will happen. Maybe by the time you're hearing this, that will have already been set into motion. We'll see. The first book in the Servants of the Empire series by Jason Fry. It's called Edge of the Galaxy, and it came out on October 21st, 2014. If you have not read these books, I believe there are 4, I believe. I'm going to look backwards. There are 4. These are, books for younger readers, featuring a character that does appear in Rebels. Doesn't appear like extensively, but he is in it. And then there's a whole book series based on him and his life and his time as like an Imperial cadet. And like, I'm not going to say anything else because it's so good. And like, I know a lot of people are hesitant about books that are for younger readers, but I'm telling you, I flew through these books, not just because they're obviously shorter word count wise, because they're meant for younger audiences, but the story is so good. Maybe we'll talk more about them because we haven't yet, and I've always meant to, because I've read them so long ago, and I really want to read them again. And maybe I will give myself a reason to do that. This is your heads up that you should maybe consider at least reading that first one, just in case. Also on October 21st, the pattern continues, is The Rebellion Begins. I don't have an author listed on my newsletter post. Not sure why that is. I would love to give credit to whoever wrote this. The Rebellion Begins. The thing I love about Rebels adjacent publishing, surrounding when it was coming out, and there's some stuff came out obviously after it started and was ongoing. It allowed for so many different potential viewers to get into the show and the characters and the time period. So you have the young readers books, the middle grade books, whatever you want to call them, but then you also have like John Jackson Miller's book, it's technically an adult novel. It's technically geared toward adults. It's dealing a lot with like Kanan, dealing with his trauma after surviving Order 66. It's a lot. It's heavy. But you give adults a book like that, and they're like, oh, like these are interesting characters. I'm going to go watch this show for kids premiering on Disney XD. By the way, if you're listening and you have never seen Star Wars Rebels, that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy, and I hope you go about fixing it, taking care of it by watching it. Don't listen to what people say about season 1 not being good, because it is. And here's another big one that's turning 10 later this year. You know this one, because you know James Luceno, who wrote Tarkin, which came out on November 4th, 2014. Yes, I have read Tarkin. Yes, I enjoyed it. Luceno is not for everyone. His writing just fascinates me, and that's why I love reading his Star Wars. We miss him. It's been too long. Tarkin is just one of those books where it gives so much backstory on a character that really didn't need more backstory, but the fact that we got the backstory is not like a disservice to the character. Like, it adds so much interesting lore, and it just adds a lot to the Star Wars universe. It's been a while since I read it, but again, maybe I should reread it soon for reasons, and maybe you should also reread it soon for reasons. I'm just giving suggestions. You don't have to listen to me. I'm just suggesting. That's all I'm doing. Nothing more than that. And we're at number 9. It's really sad that there weren't 10 books, 10 Star Wars books that turned 10. I didn't count like reference books and things like that, and just counted fiction. But, you know, maybe there were more to highlight that are not that, but here we are. And we have Michael Cogg back again with another young reader book, Droids in Distress, which came out on November 18th, 2014. And usually we don't get any Star Wars books, that, especially not fiction, not straight fiction like novels, in December. It just doesn't usually happen like that. So this is it. This is it for Star Wars books that are turning 10 this year. Happy that I was able to do this episode when we hadn't hit all those anniversaries yet, so I could live on the mic convince myself to get some things going for the show later in season 3. I'm doing great, really. I can't believe that it's been 10 years since all these books. I mean, this is where it started. Not where Star Wars publishing started, but where this new era of Star Wars publishing started, where we were doing books, you know, surrounding a brand new show that was coming out that was going to change canon forever. And it did, because, you know, what we knew of canon before is different now. And, you know, there's so much that happened in the years leading up to A New Hope that we never knew about, that the show opened our eyes to, in these books too. Just introduced us to so many interesting characters and places and concepts. I like doing these. I'm not a huge fan of listicles, despite my chosen profession, but they are fun. And I know that if I make it like a clickbaity title that you're going to listen, I won't do that. Because we don't do that on the internet anymore. You actually get in trouble for doing that. I don't know if you knew that. So I'm not misleading you in any way, but I hope that in 10 more years, we'll get to look back at the books that came out in 2024 and remember how amazing the variety of content that we got was. You know, everything from The Living Force to The High Republic to a Mace Windu novel, which is coming out next month in October. I can't say that like podcasting and this show in particular will still be around then, but I guess you never know. But I will be back next year with another Star Wars books that turn 10 then in 2025, and those are going to be some fun ones. I'm really looking forward to that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed making it. Sometimes it's nice to just talk to you, you know, just you and me, one-on-one. I'm sitting here talking to a mic. It's playing in your ears. That's fun. It's fun to have guests. It's fun to do interviews, but sometimes it's fun to just sit here and hang out, just you and me. Can't say that's going to be the case next week, but more on that later. Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Montum and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. You can keep up with the show on Substack at Now This Is Lit, and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. There are so many ways you can support the show, and all of those ways are linked in the show description. The newest way is to become a member of our Patreon. For $1 a month, you can get access to an exclusive show and a sticker. And if we get 500 people to support the Patreon per month, I can hire an editor. That would be great for me, and maybe for you too. So if you'd like to support the show with just $1 a month, you can do it that way. Or you can just keep listening and sharing the episodes. That is also helpful, and I appreciate it. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram and TikTok.